In the darkest shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and bold.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Stigmata Studios presents The Jinn Jihad. The Jinn Jihad kicks your face with myths, mysteries, epic battles, suicide bombers, quirky characters, and divine power armor. In this epic graphic novel, the warrior archangels descend on a city in chaos. It's all-out war. The non-standard assembly battles an ancient terrorist organization and their ultimate weapon, a corrupted, magically enhanced, unstoppable monster, the Jinn. This graphic novel is a wild ride. It's one part distant Arab myth, one part Old Testament angelic vengeance, and one part unique heroic tough guys. Available on Amazon. Get more info on the Jinn Jihad and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
My brother need not be idolized or enlarged in depth beyond what he was in life, to be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it. Those of us who loved him and take him to his rest today pray that he was to us and what he wished for others will someday come to pass for the whole world. As he said many times in many parts of this nation, to those he touched and who sought to touch him, some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? Theodore Kennedy.
Wanna, wow, wow. Wanna, wow, wow. Wanna, wow.
All right, yo, it's hard for me to stay on topic right now. I just got back from watching Wonder Woman, and all I want to do is sword fight and wear metal boots. And go, wow, 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 wow. Look, I'm not a movie review podcast. That's for sure, despite what you've heard on previous episodes, like the last one. But believe the hype, yo. Gal Gadot, believe the hype, yo. You can forget about Batman versus Superman. You can even forget about... Well, you don't want to forget about the time in Suicide Squad where Harley's putting her costume on. Keep that part. Get rid of all the rest of it. And that Superman fucking movie, you get rid of that. And this is where it's at, yo. Where it's at. Welcome to the Abracast episode 35. I'm John Towers. There's a lot of things I was going to do an episode on this week. One of which was this. I watched like half of this stupid Oklahoma City bombing documentary that's on Netflix. And I also saw that Netflix just put a Ruby Ridge documentary up that I haven't brought myself to try to watch yet. But I want to answer this because it's enraging. but I thought I'd give you guys some time to get to watching it. Like, my podcast isn't going to be an answer point by point to the thing, but we're going to dig a little bit deeper and off the beaten path when it comes to both of these things. They'll make a good companion to the Waco episode, which actually is one of my most popular episodes. So that's funny. Funny. Ways to support the show. You can buy some comic books for some of the commercials that you hear throughout this episode. That's the best way to do it. But if you don't like comic books, or you don't like awesome artwork with quirky characters and weirdo storylines and plots or whatever, then I'm like, what are you doing? Listen to this. But anyhow, another great way to support the show is just to pass it along. I was tallying up the numbers for last month, and we're doing good. We're doing good. But I'm here to let you know we could be doing a little bit better, everybody. So let's get on that. If you're listening to this, you probably know another weird, misfits loving, I ain't no son of a bitch singing We Are 138 that will like this. So do them a favor, pass the show around a little bit. I'm awfully behind on everything, so as prophesized, the newsletter did not go off as planned, but it will. If the newsletter hasn't been pushed out by the time this episode is up, which is in a matter of mere hours, then it will be very shortly. I'll include a link to the newsletter in case you guys want to peep it before you peep it. There's some fun recipes in there. I'm going to actually try to put all the Insta videos in. I don't know if I can put them in, but I'm going to try to put them in. Like I said, I haven't done it yet. If it was done, I wouldn't be even having this segment of the fucking episode. Previous or previews of the covers for the Novus CD that I just completed, and also I'm trying to get okay to put a preview for the anthology book that my first prose story is going to be published in. We're waiting to hear back from the publisher, who Novus, you can find them on Bandcamp. I don't know if they have a website. You can find them on Facebook and Bandcamp, and the publisher for the anthology is Burning Ball Press, or Burning Ball Publishing. You can find them. As soon as I get that okay, I'm letting everyone see that cover because it's awesome. The sneak peek of upcoming books. Like I said, I got some books popping out, and they're going to be coming up pretty soon. So last week, we got into the origins of life on Earth. It was a big topic. I spent half the episode bitching about Alien Covenant and Prometheus. When we talked about panspermia this week, we're going to get a little bit grounded, and we're going to talk this evening about an event that took place in L.A., June 6th, in the year of our Lord, 1968. Tonight we're going to get into the assassination of RFK. You can all revisit the William Colby episode for insight into my thoughts about the Kennedys. I'm going to try to keep my contempt to a minimum here as we go through this. I don't know how. This is my third time trying to record this, so I don't know how it's going to come out. So this episode I'm talking about, I just restarted twice. This show I think is really cool at getting background information, to tying it up with what we're talking about, so we can kind of see where these things come from. So there's going to be a little bit of that. We're actually going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the history of the JFK administration, just so we can kind of see, because we need it to explain some of the theories that are put after these assassinations. So these episodes can be talked about in layers. I'm going to do this a lot whenever I do this, and I did it a little bit on the Allagash episode. So this can be connected with a bunch of past episodes. You might want to revisit episode 1 and 2 with Scholar Joe Atwell, because we talk about MK Ultra and mind control experimentation. That's going to come up a little bit later. You might want to revisit episode 18, because that talks about JFK, vaccinations, AIDS, and monkeys. And obviously, we're going to be talking a little bit about JFK. And episode 30, which was not so long ago, my friends, we're going to be talking about the dangerous life and mysterious death of William Colby. And in that episode, we talk a little bit about some of the things we talk a little bit about in this episode. So what I want you to do is I want you to pour yourself a gin jihad. And I want you to stir it up with... we're talking about the Kennedys, so stir it up with your dicks. Stay away from Chappaqua and say hi to Mary Jo Kopechne, because we're going to be talking about the assassination of RFK right after this. All right. I should apologize for the dick joke and the Mary Jo Kopechne joke. Ironically, like, Bobby is probably my favorite of the Kennedy brothers. I mean, because it seems like he does keep his dick in his pants. I mean, a lot of people really didn't like him, but it, I mean, the guy thanks his dog in some of his speeches. It's wild. Anyhow, January 1961, JFK inaugurated. Immediately, like almost the first thing he did was he made Bobby his attorney general, right-hand man, and in charge of the Cuba actions. Now, I don't know if that was before Bay of Pigs. It was definitely after Bay of Pigs, though. Bobby had to sign off on everything these guys did. We're going to get into this later. Kennedy's time in office was marked by high tensions with the communist states in the Cold War. There was a government in place in Vietnam that, I'm not going to say he was a DM. His name was DM. He had a brother who was, I believe, was some sort of general. And he was working with the DMs, and the DM administration was quite friendly with the West and really took a lot of the West's, quote, suggestions, unquote. And the guy seemed to work really well. But, however, Kennedy started to work and had plans to support a coup on this government, who was, like I said, a tool of Western policy. His detractors would say to him, or would call him, the tool of Western policy. And the coup happened, people. Let me tell you. I think we're going to get into it later. Kennedy foolishly brought his country into the brink of a full-blown nuclear war, which history has whitewashed and called the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, it's funny because, like, when you look at pop culture, it cracks me up. Because when you look at the two books that are formative to me, like, my life would be different without The Watchmen by Alan Moore and The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. I would have a different life if it wasn't for these two books that I read. But both of them, you look and it's like they're all like the 80s. We were so close to nuclear war, and the 80s, and like Ronald Reagan's gonna cause nuclear war with everybody. But when you really look at it, like, the closest we've ever got to nuclear war was right here. We were literally pointing nuclear missiles at Russia. They were literally pointing nuclear missiles back at us. Well, hold on, I'm going to get to it. Gee, I'm starting to get wound up. One of these days, guys, I'm going to run out of topics, and you're going to really hear me whitewash the Reagan era. Iran-Contra, what are you talking about? He didn't even know. That was all the Bushes. Anyhow, the Cuban Missile Crisis thing, he escalated the war in Vietnam. He did this many ways. One of the ways he did it is by destroying their government and destabilizing their security forces, letting the bad guys, the northern Vietnamese, to fill the void. He authorized at least one failed assassination attempt on Castro. Now, they could get away with saying this in the history books, because after this, he passed that on to Bobby. Bobby was in charge of the assassination of Castro after the Bay of Pigs. We'll get into that, I think, too. Bay of Pigs fiasco. April 17th, 1961, the USA and CIA slash armed, funded, trained Cuban counter-revolutionary military force that invaded Cuba to overthrow the communist government. Now, it's true that this plan was initiated under Eisenhower, but JFK did sign off on it on 4/4/61. So this was, a matter of, I don't know, I'm terrible at math, 15 something, 8 days, days before it actually happened. He looked at it and was signed off on it. He was like, yes, okay, it's good, everybody. I can't find my car keys, and I talk like I got a dick in my mouth. I gotta rein it back in. To overthrow the communist government, they were defeated in 3 days, and the administration really hung these fucking guys out to dry. Yeah, they armed them, they paid them, and they trained them, but when it was happening and it became open knowledge that our government was in fact the driving force behind this invasion, they became real embarrassed. And what these guys did, okay, first of all, let's talk about these guys. 1,400 guys, 5 infantry battalions, 1 paratrooper battalion. Plus, we told them that we would do air and sea support. So on the 15th, 8 U.S. bombers attacked Cuban airfields. The night of the 16th, boats were launched from Guatemala. Castro actually was like, oh, no, he didn't. He did like 3 snaps and a whatever, and he took personal command of the defense and counteroffensive, like personally. He was like, U.S. involvement became apparent to the world, and we stopped supporting our guys. We were like, we trained you, we paid you, you have U.S. gear all over you, you're coming from Guatemala, and we're going to stop giving you naval and air support. These guys surrendered. They were publicly interrogated and locked up in Cuban prisons. I'm sure that's real. I'm sure that's a nice place to hang out. The Cuban prison. Total embarrassment. Castro, in the wake of this, Castro becomes a national hero, and he strengthens his ties with communist Russia, which leads directly to the missile crisis of 62, which we're going to talk about right now. But anyhow, like, what a total lack of leadership. Like, you get embarrassed that people figure out that you're the one behind this stuff, and instead of just fucking driving forward to get to your thing, like, you've told these guys that you're with them. I'm with you. We're gonna fucking take Cuba, and you're gonna be in charge, and you're gonna be like the head of the DMV, and you are gonna like be able to like do this stuff. But like, as soon as it gets dicey, they just lock up and they just stop providing support, just killing these guys. If they're not dying, there's probably still guys locked up in some fucking Cuban hellhole tiger cage right now because of this motherfucker. All right. Where is that? Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Or sorry, in 62. in my notes, I got lazy of writing 19, so I just did like 62, like it was like the war journal. It became known that Russians had nukes on the island of Cuba, 90 miles from Florida. Well, what a lot of this story leaves out, you have to understand, like when you read all this stuff, like everybody in the world scrambles to hide Kennedy's fuck ups. Like they just jump through amazing hoops to like get blame off of him. But you know why there was Russian nukes 90 miles from Florida on the island of Cuba? Because we had nukes in Turkey and Italy pointed right at Russia, like right within that range. And also, we just had a failed. This is the biggest one. We actually just had a failed invasion of Cuba, where a bunch of cigar chomping cowboys whipped our asses. It's vexing. It's really vexing to me. This is. So to me, it seems like we locked. Oh, this is a locked up thing too. Like soon as we got caught ignoring the missiles. This was during the, I can't remember what year it was, but it was the midterm elections, and a lot of the Republicans were running on saying like, hey, I'm in the Senate Arms Committee, and I know for a fact that there's missiles on Cuba, 90 miles away from Florida, and our president's not doing anything about it. So he was forced into action, which forced him into inaction. This is something we see from him time and time again. He just locks up. When you look at Wikipedia, they go, well, there was a lot of tense negotiation. But if you really parse out what it wasn't tense negotiation. They weren't communicating at all. They weren't communicating with Russia at all through diplomatic means or whatever. They just totally locked up. It took a Russian spy who was in the Russian like State Department or something like that in Washington. So some sort of ambassador or diplomatic character, and this fucking guy from ABC News got together over coffee, and they were like, hey, I bet you our leaders could work it out if just they could. And so this guy was like, hey, they want to do, this is the back channel. Like nowadays, back channel is a buzzword for like something that's going on that's illegal. This is how the 13 days, this is how the Cuban Missile Crisis got solved, because some asshole reporter from ABC was friends with the Russian spy, and they opened up negotiations where it was out of the public purview. And they were able to be like, all right. So they, all of a sudden, Khrushchev writes this love letter to Kennedy, and Kennedy's like, well, yeah, I say everything like I got a dick in my mouth. So, this tastes good to me. I mean, I don't. That's what happens when I go off a script. It all goes to blowjob jokes. Anyhow, so these two no good nobodies, like I said, a Russian spy and a Russian spy, get together and they help sort this mess out. And in the end, again, it leads to nothing but a complete public humiliation of Kennedy, which again nobody ever talks about. The agreement, as this is announced, is that the U.S. promised to never invade Cuba again or back anyone who has plans to invade Cuba. The Russians was like, fine, we'll move our nuclear missiles away from Cuba. But what people don't know is that there was secretly a promise where they're like, hey, yo, bro, don't tell anybody this, but we'll also remove our missiles from Turkey and Italy, the ones that were pointed right at your fucking faces. So you see, it's just this over and over. It's just this lock up. You can't lock up. We can't communicate. We can't lead. We can't do anything. And then we'll just cave. And the media and the history books just totally like don't fucking say what happened. They don't say what happened. Well, I don't get into this in this episode, in these notes, in this lesson plan. This is the same fucking shit that happened with the civil rights bill and stuff. It's like, it's so crazy and ugly and politically motivated, but everyone just is like, they just forget about that part. It's crazy. All right, back to the commercial. All right, now it's over. January 20th, 61, JFK is president. January 20th, 1961, RFK is attorney general and right-hand man. November 22nd, 1963, JFK gets assassinated. Hey, do you know what JFK's last words were? I need this parade like I need a hole in my head. Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson becomes president. Again, that's on the same day, November 22nd, 1963. 1964, Johnson wins in a landslide against Goldwater, which is probably one of the giganticest travesties in modern American political history. RFK soon quits as Attorney General. Oh, that happened in September of 64. He runs for senator, the senator from New York in 1964. This, by the way, is a sure thing for celebrity Democrats to do. This is exactly the same thing that Hillary Clinton did when she needed a surefire win. She moved to New York and became their senator there. This is the thing. He's asked. He's like, these reporters are like, "Hey, man, it really seems like you're just trying to like run for president." And he swears that he will be senator for 8 years before he runs for president. However, on March 16th, 1968, RFK, after only serving as senator for 3 years, announces that he will be running for president. June 6, 1968, Los Angeles, California. This is the day that there was the knock at his door. This is when the metal meets the road. This is when the rubber meets the road. This is when, the Valkyrie calls for you. RFK scores a big win in California. He was at the Ambassador Hotel just after midnight in L.A. After his address, he was leaving the ballroom. He actually goes the wrong way. If you'll see, back then, the Secret Service didn't guard presidential candidates like they do now. And this is why. This is why. He had this retired FBI guy who was like a security guy. And he's like, "Hey, when you get done, remember to leave from this side, not this side." Well, as soon as he was done, he left from he goes to the wrong side. He was leaving the ballroom, and he winds up having to go through the hotel kitchen. He stops to shake hands with these two kitchen workers. A young man brandishes a .22 revolver and fires 5 times. RFK was hit 3 times. He was hit in the under his arm, not his armpit, but right on the rib side of his armpit, through his shoulder and right into his noodle. 5 other people were injured. 3 guys tackled the shooter. One of them was a football player. One of them was an award-winning triathlete or something. And one of them was George Plimpton. And they grabbed the guy's hand and they were just kept blasting it against the ground until it was like Jesus from Big Lebowski, until it goes click. And it was like, bam, 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 click, click, click. So 5 times, 3 guys injured. That's going to give you a little bit of a hint of where we're going, I think. But it was a .22. So I guess they make .22 8-round, 8-cylinder .22s. So forget everything I just said. So the guy I didn't get into all the minutia of who's holding his hand and who's massaging his neck and who's like brushing his hair out of his face. You know, when you watch a lot of videos of Bobby Kennedy, he really does do this thing where he's like brushing his hair out of his face. And when I was a kid, I was a skater punk, and I always had these real long hair on top and like shaved on the side. And I'm always like I was always like flipping my hair out of my face all the time like this. So I guess I kind of connected with Bobby Kennedy, but he always does this like, yeah, I'm from Harvard, I can, whatever. His actually accent was a lot less irritating than his two other brothers' accents. I don't know if I already said that, because I recorded this episode 3 times already. I'm trying to pare it down to the least offensive to the Kennedys as I could get, but he really had like this tick of like where he'd brush his hair out of his face. So totally, I imagine him like laying there, delivering his last words before he goes into a coma, like brushing his hair out of his face. But he goes, he says, "Is everyone okay?" And the guy, whoever's hugging him, is like, yeah, man, everybody's okay. And he's like, everything's gonna, Bobby Kennedy, it's like, everything's gonna be okay. I've been in situations like this where I thought I was at the door of death, and I'm like, yo, everything's gonna be great, everybody. His last words. So medics finally get in, they able to clear a way out because everyone's fucking hysterical and everyone's crowding and everyone wants to like touch their robe to the blood of RFK, and they want to help him carry his cross, you know, to the boat waiting for him at the River Styx. So they put him on this stretcher, and right before they're gonna lift him up to take him to the hospital, he's like, "Wait, don't lift me." I think it's hilarious. They fucking lift him. That's the last words he says. If I was looking at this as like a Monty Python sketch, that's why I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at this man that died. I know everyone loves it. A lot of people, some people out there love him and all this stuff, but to me, it just seems like such a comedy of errors. Like, he's so worried about everybody. He's like, is everyone going to be all right? Are you okay? Everything's going to be all right. And then he's like, don't lift me, and they lift him, and it's just like they unplug him out of the wall. I know. Don't write me fucking shit. Like, I told you it was going to be dicey. I think I told you. In one of the episodes I recorded, I said I was going to try to keep my fucking contempt to myself. So his last words were, "Don't lift me." He became unconscious. He lost consciousness, and then he died in the hospital earlier the next day. So who killed RFK? Dun, dun, dun. Asking me where were you ever in a situation where you had to be like, yeah, I'm okay, and then you're going to die? Listen, fools. I used to do security work for that was a very large company, a multinational company, and even though I was based here in Pittsburgh, they would send me away to do security jobs. I've done multiple Super Bowls. I've ran the first level. I've ran, the security at media compounds. I've ran security on the actual 100 level of 2 Super Bowls. Like, I've been around. I've done some shit. So one of the things I did, they sent me to New Jersey to work Ozfest one year. Me and my buddy, who's Jack Massacre, he's a 6'9", 325-pound guy. We actually, after the security biz went away, we actually got into the indie wrestling world together. So, like, this dude, he's huge. He's a semi-pro football player. So we were doing this Ozfest this was like way back in the day. And they didn't have jersey barriers lined up. They just had like these bicycle racks lined up from like the lawn to the seating area. So there was like the seating area, like under the pavilion, like along, like, have you ever seen like Blossom Music Center, or like here in Pennsylvania, or here in Pittsburgh, it used to be called Star Lake. Now it's called like the Pepsi Roadhouse, whatever fucking corporate name fucking jerk off thing that it is. But have you ever seen like an outdoor amphitheater? This is what we're talking about. It's like a seating area with a pavilion over top of it, some steps going out into the lawn, and that's where like everybody else sits. And then there's like the overpriced beer over here and this over there, yada yada. So they didn't have like Jersey barrier for an Ozfest. They had bicycle rack. And we were this was when right before Limp Bizkit was huge. I mean, obviously they were big, but this was not like, I gotta have faith big. I don't think. It at least didn't make it over here. I'm trying not to waste a lot of time in this story, so I'm just gonna skip ahead. They asked Jack Massacre to follow Fred around, because Fred was going to jump. Fred Durst, I'm talking about. Fred Durst was going to jump off the stage and run up through the crowd. And so I was like, yeah, go ahead. You know, you can do that, bro. That's fine. I'll just hang out here and help these guys with this Jersey barrier, or this bicycle fence. Well, we didn't know, but Fred got out there, and like in the first like song or two, he start yelling like "fuck security" and like, come on over the rail and hang out with us. And like, he didn't like that all the people in the pavilion were sitting down, and he wanted like a gigantic mosh pit or something. But the point that you need to take is that he said like "fuck security." He was like, "Fuck these fucking security guys." And so they start, these people, this is brainwashing, by the way. I could tie this into this episode. He's encouraging these guys to come over the rails. So they're coming over the rails, we're pushing them back over, whatever. And this bicycle fence, they start picking up this bicycle fence. So I'm like on the middle of the bicycle fence, and I know like one guy that was on the other side, and all the other dudes start like peeling off, because they were like, we were getting pushed down the steps. So they were like pussies, and they were like peeling off. And I look at my buddy, and my buddy's like, "Are you worried?" And I'm like, "No, bro, everything's fine. Everything's cool. You know, we just got to like hang on to this fence, and we just keep losing ground. We just keep getting pushed back. Well, unbeknownst to me, I wasn't able to have situational awareness of all this stuff, because I'm almost fighting for my life. If I were to fall backwards, I would get trampled under this fence, under this bicycle rack. So I'm like, just focus at the job at hand, holding back the the fucking mindless horde of Limp Bizkit fans. And so, unbeknownst to me, this is when Fred jumps off the stage, and he runs right up to like where my fucking like battle point was, and he's yelling like, "Yeah, fuck these security guys, come on through." And Jack Massacre was like, "Fred, you're on your own." And he gets down to like this 3-point like football stance, and he just runs, and he grabs this thing, and he pushes these guys up like 5 fucking steps, and sets the barricade down, or the bicycle fence down. And he's like, "It stays here." And all these guys, it was like Andre the Giant or something, like in Princess Bride. Like all these guys on the other side of the fence, when he put it down, they all just like tumbled back. Like in my brain, it's like dominoes falling, or like bowling pins falling down. So that was my time where I'm like, you know, like, hold the line, hold the line. I mean, there's not guns and knives involved, but like, it was life and death in my view. Like, if I was on the steps going down, if that thing were to have tilted, and these just avalanche of people, whether they were trying to run or not, they would have just poured down and fucking crushed me. So you might call me stupid for holding the line, but I did my job. I held the line. I didn't know Jack Massacre would be there to save me. We talk every time we get drunk. We talk about this story, and yeah. So that's my shit. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know if I should play another thing to clear our minds of this, or get right back into our thing. The epilogue to that story, real quick, is that Ozfest was in town 2 days that year. It was a July 4th, and then they took a day off on July 5th. And on July 5th, that episode happened because I remember on the on the 6th, the show on the 6th, they actually had Jersey Barrier there. They actually listened to us when we were like, no, you have to have Jersey Barrier here. But that show on the 4th, when all the drama went down, when the real life beef went down between me and Jack Massacre and Fred Durst, they had to cut their set short because he was trying to get back to the stage, and the crowd mobbed him, and he actually wound up getting a couple cracked ribs, so he had to cut his set short. And on the 6th, the same guy found Jack Massacre and was like, yo, Fred's going to come down again, and, we want you to follow him through the crowd. Obviously, he didn't understand what was all going on, but Jack Massacre looked at the head of security guy who was recruiting him to do this, and he goes, yo. If Fred Durst gets off this stage, he's on his own. And Fred didn't get off the stage that night, so, yeah, there you go. Okay, so who is Sirhan Sirhan? He's a Palestinian born in 1944 in Jerusalem. Although he had a Jordanian citizenship. He's a strong opponent of Israel. He stated in 1989 he had an interview with Mark Frost. You know, the journalist that did like Frost versus Nixon or whatever. He stated that he was angry about RFK's support of Israel, and he was mad about 50 bombers that he was going to send to them if he was able to become a president. And I got to tell you something, that doesn't wash with me. This is why it doesn't wash with me. We make a lot of our money by selling arms to people who are in wars on our behalf. So I don't think we were giving bombers away. We were probably selling them to the Hebrews or to the Israelis. So that's what I had to say. He's got a bunch of other weird stuff. He and his brother migrated to the U.S. Sirhan originally, as a child or as a young man, wanted to be a UN translator, which is a weird thing for me. Like a fireman, a cop, an FBI agent. But like it just seems weird that a kid's like, I want to be a UN translator. But something happened to him. He started working in a stable, and he was trained to be a jockey. So that gives you a little bit of insight to how big he was. He was religiously fluid. I actually invented that term today when I was writing these notes down. Religiously fluid. He was religion fluid. He changed denominations frequently, and he eventually joined an occult organization called the Ancient Mystical Order of the Rose Cross, commonly known as the Rosicrucians. And if you're like, I never heard of this, is this like Ordo Templi Orientis? No. Is this like the Freemasons? No. Is this like the Grand Lodge of the Freemasons? No. Is this like the Golden Dawn? No. These guys do most of their business through mail order catalogs. They send you online courses. They're like the Phoenix University of mystical organizations, But at the time, he got interested in hypnosis, and his brother actually says in this, a lot of this data comes from a documentary that's available on YouTube called The Second Gun, and they interview Sirhan's brother, which I guess his name is Sirhan at some point in time. The other thing is this breaks the Assassin 3 name thing. Like, no one calls him Sirhan Brasher Sirhan. They just call him Sirhan. I would like it if it was Sirhan, but it's not. So, I mean, that might be pointing to some kind of esoteric meaning, that he's not a 3 first named character. But anyhow, they talk to Sirhan's brother, who is, Peter Jacoby Sirhan. And they asked him, and he was like, yeah, he got real interested in hypnosis, and he would keep a fishing line weight on a string in his room so he could hypnotize himself. And I'm like, stand back, son. That isn't a real thing. You can't. I don't know a whole lot about hypnosis, but I don't think you can hypnotize yourself. I mean, maybe Tony Robbins could do that kind of. I don't know. I don't know who could do it. I need to do a show on hypnosis now so I can fucking figure it out. So after the assassination, Sirhan famously says and sticks to until this very day that he does not remember shooting Kennedy. He remembers going there, he remembers having the gun, and he remembers getting attacked by Rosie Greer and his hand fucking raped. But he doesn't remember the actual doing of the deed. Among the things they find while they're investigating Sirhan is a journal. And when they open up the journal, there's just like these weird scrolled RFK must die scribbled into it. It looks like something out of a movie, son. This is like out of Seven or something. It was just like Sirhan says RFK must die. Well, eventually he was tried and convicted to death, which was later scaled back to life in prison without possibility of parole, which is all bullshit. If you're not going to correct him, why are you keeping him? Why are you wasting our money keeping him alive? This is fucking retarded. Anyhow, he's currently 77 years old, and he's pleading out and applying for paroles and applying for appeals because he's like a victim of MK Ultra mind control experiments. Which I don't know. It seemed, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but it seems to me like if you were going to say I was brainwashed, you need to be away for a while, I think. Like, you can't do part-time brainwashing. Like, I don't think you can go to your psychiatrist 2 times a week for a couple months and get brainwashed into killing Bobby Kennedy. This seems to be like something you need to be locked away for a long time. There needs to be various techniques, psychic driving, and a lot of probably hallucinogenic drugs involved, a lot of like stay awake drugs involved, a lot of like sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation. Like, you can't just talk to this guy a couple hours a week after a couple months and expect him to be your Manchurian candidate. We're going to get into this. I actually jumped the gun a little bit here. Okay, so, oh, shit. You guys know who his prosecutor was? It was Buck Compton from Easy Company, 506th. This is the guy. He was one of the guys in the Band of Brothers, the HBO show. Buck Compton was the guy who got shot in the ass, and it actually went into one cheek, out of one cheek, into the other cheek, and out to one cheek. He had one bullet hole. Well, he had one bullet with 4 holes. Buck Compton. Which is funny because we're going to get into like how weird bullets act when they like impact into things. So, yeah. So here's an interesting thing that I didn't even know this, that he became he was a prosecutor once he got done with, once he captured Eagle's Nest, which I was in, which I've seen, he actually became a lawyer, which is crazy. So we're going to get next into who are these assassins and what are their theories. I'm going to try to do this all in one read. All right. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to be out of breath because I got to run up some steps. Hold on. All right, here we go. Here we go. All right, Sirhan was, we're going to say he's one of the legitimate assassins, but it was not cut and dry. You see, instead, Sirhan was a pre-programmed assassin, a Manchurian candidate. What is a Manchurian candidate, you ask? Especially if you sit through that Denzel Washington remake of the classic 1960s movie where they explain it so well. He's a guy who's brainwashed into becoming an assassin. using various mind control techniques, like we talked about: drugs, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, pushing, where you were just say the same sequence of words over and over again into some guy's ear holes for months. Then there is a side theory that maybe Sirhan hypnotized himself. His brother said he became interested in hypnosis, and he was getting interested, and when he was getting interested in joining the Rosicrucians. The Rosicrucians is also something I'm sure we're going to wind up doing a whole episode on later because it's so weird. Either way, Sirhan was not in control of himself when he did the crime. This is why he cannot remember it. Okay, so the next thing is contact to the front or to the rear. As in a lot of these situations, people pour over the data with rulers, dowel rods, mannequins, bullets lodged into door jambs, walls, trying to make sense of all this carnage. How far away the gun was. There's been a lot of confusing upward angles of the bullet holes. People point out that the autopsy report actually indicates that the rounds came fired from behind RFK. And you'll see some illustrations of this, like they're trying to figure out how it works, and it's like they have a cartoon of a guy like giving RFK a noogie, but instead it's with this with this gun. So multiple guns, a second gun. There's a security guard whose name was Nathaniel Caesar, who was right behind Kennedy, where the bullets would place him if he were to be the one to shoot him. So what they're saying is that the upward angle of the rounds do not fit with the actual autopsy report. And they say that the autopsy report actually would say that the bullets were pointing down. So instead of being on the ground or being equal and a couple feet away from RFK, they'd have to be actually behind him, shooting down. It's hard to get your brain around. But there was this guy named Nathaniel Caesar who did some shady shit. He was right behind Kennedy, where these bullets would have, and at least one quote eyewitness unquote says that he saw him shooting. The cops didn't look at him. They didn't ever ask him about his gun. And when they did get around to ask him about his gun, it was like 3 months prior, and he was like, "Oh, I got rid of that gun like ages ago, bro." So they're like, "Well, this is obviously the guy." A lot of conspiracy theorists that look at this are like, this is our dude. This is our dude. He just snuck up behind him and shoot him. To me, this is the same thing as like when you hear the guys saying the driver of Kennedy's car was actually the guy who shot him. Like he was driving with his right arm on the steering wheel and he just reached like a cowboy or something. He like Han Solo in the cantina. He just reached his gun out and without aiming at all. Maybe he was a trick shot in the Buffalo Bill traveling Wild West circus. He just stuck a gun under his arm and just shot that way. So you see, this evidence leaves a lot of room for a lot of people to make a lot of assumptions. So there's also Sandra Serrano's story. She was outside on a fire escape, catching her breath of fresh air at the Ambassador Hotel. She was there as part of the thing, but she was like, "It's too crowded. I just gotta wait outside." Outruns this dude, and a Latino dude and a Latino girl, but the girl had a polka dot dress on, and she yelled, "We shot him! We shot Kennedy!" So this Sandra Serrano, she tells her story to the cops, and the cops round her up and keep her for 2 hours in there with this cop, and there's audio of it that survives, and you can find the audio like on YouTube. where this guy's like, for the love of the Kennedy family, can you just not say the word we? Like, that's all he wanted. Like, can you just say that there was just one guy? And she, like, holds out, but eventually she crumbles. So I don't know what that means, but eventually she recants her story or whatever, and what is in the official report doesn't make reference to the word we, as in there is more than one person. But this, when you listen to this interrogation or this mind control episode, whatever you want to call it, this guy's a real motherfucker. Like, for a minute, he's like, everything's cool. I can tell you're a nice girl. I can tell you love RFK and everything, and you just want everything to be cool. But I mean, just for the love of the Kennedys, you just gotta not say we. And he gets her to, his bullshit works. He gets her to do it. But I mean, she does subsequent interviews and stuff where she is like, no, like, literally, I just gave in to him because he was being a dick. All right, so there's another guy, David Morales, and he was a big deal in CIA. He was part of the group that works with Cuba, and he was part of the guys who were trying to assassinate Castro and destabilize Cuba. And CIA in this department at this time was full of anti-Kennedy rhetoric and sentiment since the fuck up of the Bay of Pigs. And like they have this guy. There's a lot of different witnesses who are like, yeah, well, I asked the guy what happened in Dallas, and he was like, yeah, we got that motherfucker. And they're like, well, okay, well, what about L.A.? And they're like, yeah, we got the little motherfucker too. So they scour through. Like, do you guys ever see that movie? I think it's called Snake Eyes, where like Nicolas Cage is like in control of all the video cameras in a casino, and a robbery takes place, and you get to see like everything going on from like 2 or 3 different points of view. This is what these people have done to this RFK thing. They're like, look, I see this guy here with a tie, and then 3 hours later, I see him walking around back here, the same guy. And a lot of guys that they talked to, or a couple of these guys that they talked to, that knew this David Morales, who was a CIA dude, and he was in reports, and he had anti-Kennedy sentiments, was there at that day. So I just thought it was an honorable mention to get it in there. Because it seems like it's a weird thing if that was really him wandering around back there. But at the end of the day, there's a problem with eyewitnesses. And the problem is, in every kind of like detective or like trained observer will tell you that what you see isn't what you see. Because your adrenaline's pumping. Your mind's filling in the blanks of these ideas. Like, look, I'm just talking from like a security standpoint. If you're trying to get what happened, who started a fight from 4 different people, it's all going to be different, man. And I've sat there and I've tried to do it. Like, you try to fucking parse it out. That's why when you go to like sporting events and stuff, or concert events and stuff, or like anywhere there's a lot of people hanging around and stuff, they just have a 0 tolerance policy on fights, because you can never figure out who did what first, because everyone's got their own fucking answer. Plus you throw in a bunch of booze, or in this case, sleep deprivation. This was like happening after midnight on a real stressful day for all of these people involved. Eyewitness statements deteriorate. And you hear this over and over again, but these conspiracy theory guys will like latch onto it like a crazy person, and they'll just parse out words like pull it, or pull your people from that building. You know what I'm talking about? 9/11, all that 9/11 shit. So, you can't get onto it. Or like, what if this Sandra lady heard, like they shot him instead of we shot him? That's not something, we can't rewind her fucking memory and figure it out. So at the end of the day, on top of that, I hate the term end of the day, by the way, and I'm sorry for just thrusting it upon you, but also this is one of those things, like this is a couple years after the Kennedy thing, where I believe that this is where our left-right divide in the country comes from right now. I believe it comes from JFK, because it's like, look, a lot of people are like, it couldn't just be this one lone communist douchebag that did this. It has to be the oil drilling Republicans that did it. So, but what everyone's undermining is that, like, look, you can't stand between a Marine and his fucking weapon. Sergeant Gunny will tell you that. And these guys pray to their guns and they sing songs about them. So I'm not trying to get this into a Lee Harvey Oswald thing for sure, but I believe that the tear that we're seeing in our country, even to this day, was because of this guy's brother when he got assassinated by whoever assassinated him. So you have to kind of figure that into your formula too. It's like people are like, oh, JFK was the best president ever, and it's weird. Gallup poll, like even Gallup polling to this day, says he's like one of the 70th best presidents, John F. Kennedy. But like when you look at the facts, that's not backed up by anything. It literally isn't. Like that's not backed up by a single fucking thing. His foreign policy was a disaster. We actually went over it pretty thoroughly. I mean, for my level of academics here, and just the human wreckage that he waged behind him. But you still have to figure it into this Bobby Kennedy thing. And thank God Ted Kennedy never ran for president. I mean, he did enough damage at Chappaqua with Mary Jo Kopechne. Anyhow, I'm glad. I hope that you guys hung in towards the end, and I'm glad. Hopefully, I didn't offend anybody too much, but yeah, I believe that history is really kind to the Kennedys, and the fact that they got assassinated earlier in their careers really leads them to a lot of, the conspiracy theories are like, well, he signed presidential memos like that he was gonna de-escalate the war soldiers in Vietnam. Well, first of all, the only reason all these soldiers were in Vietnam is because he staged a coup on the puppet government that he had in place. Leaving a power vacuum, causing an escalation of soldiers in the first place. Second of all, signing a presidential memo isn't anything. It's not a law. It's not a mandate. It's not an order. He's just like hey, guys, this is what I'm planning to do. It doesn't mean anything. And on top of that, like when you look at Bobby's the way that he won California, which was the impetus of this whole situation, is that he was doing I believe, I could be wrong, I don't know, but he's the big first guy doing identity politics. He's like, thank you blacks for coming out to vote for me. Thank you poor people for coming out to vote for me. Thank you Catholics for coming out to vote for me. He's like, he's not talking to the Americans. He's talking to like compartmentalized pieces of victims. So I don't know. I feel like I've overstayed my welcome with you guys. I thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you got to the end of it, I know I have some unsavory views on some topics that are universally accepted. Like the Kennedys were God and there was Camelot and all this kind of stuff. I think that they were seriously flawed men that had all kinds of problems and leadership issues and, whatever. They made themselves attractive to these shooters, man. One way, I don't really mean that part. if I edited the show, I would take it out. But I don't, so I'm not gonna. But yeah, they had leadership problems for sure. They had leadership problems. All right, that's it. You can visit stigmatastudios.com and click the comic link to go look for my comics and my graphic novels and web comics. You can find comic books at indieplanet.us. You can find graphic novels at Amazon. You support the show, I already told you, by buying comics or just spreading the word. Newsletter, if it's not out yet, it will be very soon. I'll actually, if I publish it before I publish this episode, I'll have a link to the newsletter in the notes. Check it out. There'll be some great recipes and stuff. Oh, the Insta videos. I'm going to try to put the Insta videos on there if I can. If you're wondering what to listen to next, you're like, oh, God, the episode of this, that, and the other cast isn't out yet. What am I going to listen to? You can go to society-13.com and find a bevy of great shows. So thank you guys again for wading through this with me. I appreciate it. I know I was not being very respectful to some of these men that have perished in the service of our country. However, they're very, very untrustworthy. So thank you guys again, and let me leave you with this. This is what Ho Chi Minh said after the DMs got assassinated. They got killed. These guys, by the way, they got killed in the back of an M113 A3 or M113 armored personnel carrier, which I know because I drove one for a long time. The back of a armored personnel carrier could be the loneliest, coldest place you've ever been. I mean, I doubt it was freezing in Vietnam, but here's what Ho Chi Minh had to say on the news of the DM's assassination. I could scarcely believe that the hold on, wait a minute. I'm gonna stop. Hold on, all over again. This is what Ho Chi Minh said upon the news of the DM's assassination. I can scarcely believe the Americans would be so stupid. And that's it. So thank you guys for listening to the show. All right, he goes on to say the consequences of the 1st November coup d'etat will be contrary to the calculations of the U.S. imperialist. Diem was one of the strongest individuals resisting the people and communism. Everything that could be done in an attempt to crush the revolution was carried out by Diem. Diem was one of the most competent lackeys of U.S. imperialism. Along with the anti-communists in South Vietnam or exiled in other countries, no one has sufficient political assets and abilities to cause the others to obey. Therefore, the lackey administration cannot be stabilized. The coup d'etat on November 1st, 1963 will not be the last. Actually, Ho Chi Minh was really right about that. After this coup d'etat, they were never able to prop up. The U.S. was not even able to prop up or install another stable government. It was just coup d'etat after coup d'etat after coup d'etat, which led to actually the shitstorm that became the end of Vietnam and the fall of Saigon. So I wish I would have put that somewhere else in the middle of the show maybe, but you know, whatever. We got to roll with what we got, and I'm not recording this fucking episode one more time.
Stigmata Studios presents The Scorpion Strikes. In this comic book, a terrorist called the Scorpion is transported to a secret CIA prison. He quickly turns the tables on the guards and administrators and releases the prisoners. A well-armed anarchist called Constituent Zero assembles a team and fights to take the prison back. This story is a dark political action thriller The Scorpion's actions set the stage perfectly for the Jin Jihad. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com. Stigmata Studios presents The Test of the Scorpion. In this comic book, while the Jin Jihad is raging on one side of the city, the terrorist called the Scorpion sets a secondary attack in motion as he obtains a small tactical nuclear bomb. A mysterious, ever-living warrior called Cyrus the Dead Guy steps forward to test the faith of the Scorpion and his lunatic followers. This is an action-adventure story. It's a bit of swashbuckler that wraps up the Jihad stories. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, The Test of the Scorpion, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
I'm John Towers. This is the Abercast. And where's some mini John Lee Hooker at? No. John Lee Hooker, where's he at? I don't know if this is the right one. Thank you guys. Hear from you next week. We got some fun stuff coming up for you, by the way. Check out the Abercast on Facebook. There's a Facebook page for the Abercast. StigmataStudios.com. Yeah. My sex drive all night like a trucker. I'm a sexy motherfucker. Hey.